picked the minute-long one instead of the 30-second one, so that felt like ages there. So this is Tolkien's Legendarium 2, Tolkien's Revenge, and it's sponsored by Iron Brew. And I have absolutely no plan for this one. It's I've called it a Q&A, but we can just talk about anything Tolkien related. I changed it from AMA before, because a surprising amount of people didn't know what it meant. They kept asking me what's an AMA. It's Ask Me Anything, but I've changed it to the classic Q&A. But you know, let's just talk about Tolkien. It can be about videos, past, present, or future. It can be the channel, anything Tolkien related, even that TV show. If you wanted to ask something about it, you know, that's how open this is. Okay, and I'll just wait for some people to show up. Who've we got so far? All my loyal slaves, I mean followers, are here, and let's see. Hello to you, Istari, who I think appears on every single video that I make, so it's good to see you here. And Gloin, my father, has shown up. And some questions already. I don't get any rest, do I? But oh, we've got a mod here now. Patricia's here, so no pornographic links or anything like that, or you'll get banned forever. So yeah, hello to everyone, and I might as well just jump in and get started with a very relevant question, which is, will I ever make a video on Tom Bombadil? Yeah, I don't know if anyone follows the channel on Twitter. I don't recommend it because Twitter's terrible. But I recently posted that I'm very close to 30,000 subscribers. And I said, if I get 30,000 by, this is such a clickbait YouTuber thing to do, but saying if I get 30,000 by the weekend, there will be a Tom Bombadil video on the horizon. So I've not made one. The channel's nearly 2 years old. It's 2 years old in May. So I would probably do a Tom Bombadil video in May, because I think a lot of people want a video like that. And the reason I haven't made one so far is that I've seen quite a lot of other Tom Bombadil videos from other channels, and it's all the same stuff. It's always, who is he? Here's some theories that we've all heard before, and do you think he's annoying or not? And it's just, I kind of thought if I made a Tom Bombadil video, it would just be all the same stuff, wouldn't it? So I've put it off, but I think I've got some interesting stuff to say, and that may sound really arrogant. I'm not saying it'd be the best Tom Bombadil video ever. I'd still be saying a lot of the stuff that everyone else has said, but I think 2 years is long enough not to do any video on Tom Bombadil. So I'm probably preaching to the choir here. Most of you are probably subscribed, but another 80 subscribers or something by the weekend, and the Tom Bombadil video will be in May. But if I don't make 30,000 by the weekend, I'll probably still make one. So it's just a stupid thing I put up on Twitter. So yes, to answer your question, I will make one, and it should be pretty soon, to be honest. And it might actually be 2. I recently made that Sauron video and I split it into 2, and I think that was pretty good for actually making it and releasing it. So I've got a few ideas for Tom Bombadil, and I think it might be split into two. I think one of them will be a discussion about why I think he deserves a place in Lord of the Rings, because I think a lot of people really hate him and they say he's pointless and all that. I think it would be a video about that, me trying to prove that he's not pointless and he deserves to be there as much as Galadriel deserves to be there. And I think the other one would be what he represents. Not necessarily what he is, because I don't think we can answer that, but what he represents. So I think I might split it in two, but see how I feel. So some more people have shown up. Hello. And second question of the night is about Rings of Power. Here we go. First time watcher, hello. My take on Rings of Power. I don't like it. It doesn't feel like Tolkien to me. It's I'm someone who would have enjoyed it, even though it doesn't feel like Tolkien, if it was well written. And I don't think it was. I think it's actually not a very good TV show in general. It really reminded me of Wheel of Time, which I stopped after 4 episodes, I think. But I stuck through this one because obviously I like Tolkien and I wanted to see where it was going, and it didn't get much better. Obviously, I'll watch season 2 to see what happens. But if season 2 is just as bad, I probably won't do the other seasons. But yeah, it's really, I wouldn't even say it was average. It was not a very good show at all. And it's very strange that the best characters were made up characters, which just to me shows that they're not handling the real characters very well at all. And that's just bad, in my opinion. It's, I hate the word cringe. I don't want to say that, but there's so many times in the show where I was not wanting to watch it. It was just, what are they doing? The whole Mount Doom erupting thing with some secret key and all that. It's like, what is this? It just didn't feel like, I know we call Tolkien fantasy and everything, but it didn't feel like Tolkien's fantasy. It just felt like generic fantasy. And that, I think generic fantasy is all the stuff that came after Tolkien, and his is a bit special, obviously. And it just didn't feel special at all. It's very weak, especially the writing. So, but I did watch it all, and I'm not a hater. If people want to say that, I could spend hours here explaining why I didn't really enjoy it, but my take is that it wasn't a very good show, and maybe it'll get better, but it just doesn't feel like Tolkien to me personally. Well, I think the first thing I have to say is it's I was told that in other streams I tend to start answering and I don't actually read out what someone's asked, and some people don't watch the video, so I'll start again here. Gandalf is asking why the Ringwraiths cloak themselves when they are invisible. They rely on terror, but it seems if they really wanted to take the ring, they could if they were invisible. Unfortunately, the main reason it seems here is for story reasons. It's, we can always pick holes and everything and say, well, they could just be invisible. But Tolkien really gets around this by saying that terror that emanates from them can still be really felt even when they're unclad. And would they get anywhere close to the ring to actually be able to take it if they were unclad? And I think for Lord of the Rings, most of the time we see them cloaked. First of all, in the Fellowship, it's for finding the ring, finding the Shire. They have to interact with the world. They have to talk to people. And the movies, I don't know why I'm bringing the movies up, but the movies kind of imply that, you know, they kind of know what it was and they're just going to ride in and take it. But there's this huge struggle to find the Shire from the Ringwraiths, and they're actually talking with spies and talking with other people. They couldn't do that if they were unclad, I'll say. Everyone would just be running away from them constantly. And despite them still having this terror, it's lessened when they seem human, I'll say. I know they're human, but I think you know what I mean. If they just seem like riders in black, even though you're not really wanting to speak with them, you can do it. But if they were just these shapeless things, everyone would just be running in all directions and wouldn't want to talk to them. So that's why they're like that in the Fellowship. Then later, it's more a case of they are commanding forces and they still have to have a shape. So it's part storytelling. We can always pick holes and things. And the role in the story requires them to actually have a shape. You know, I would agree that by the time of the Return of the King, if they're just letting all these forces run riot, they probably could have removed cloaks and spread terror that way, but maybe they'd end up spreading terror to their own forces as well, and that wouldn't help anyone. I'm already behind the chat. Here we go. I really like that you've said Sauron died first two times. That's pleased me. I've had always people arguing that he didn't die. Okay, so we started to ask when Sauron died the first two times. That's on Numenor and at the end of the Second Age. Did he have to withdraw power from the One Ring to recreate a physical form? No. Okay. Tolkien says it takes longer each time Sauron dies to regain a shape because the will diminishes in some way. He actually uses the word energy as well. Like this, something that's inherent to him diminishes in a way when he dies. But in both these cases, the ring itself still exists and he's still the Lord of the Rings. It's not that he has to withdraw power from the One Ring to create a form. It's that the One Ring still exists in the world. He's still the Lord of it. He's in rapport with it, which means that power within him hasn't diminished to the point where he couldn't recreate a physical shape, which is what happens at the end of the Lord of the Rings. Once that ring is destroyed, that power he placed into it's removed from him completely, and he does not have that will to recreate a physical form. He'd want to do it, he'd probably tried to do it, and it's just not going to happen. And in those other cases, the ring still existed. In one case, he had the ring with him. In the second case, it was taken from him, but it still existed. That power is still in the world. So it's not that he has to take bits of power from it, because if he could withdraw power from the One Ring, that's like us saying that he could withdraw all the power from the One Ring, and that doesn't make any sense. It's more that the ring still exists, and that helps him when he's actually taking shape again. Hopefully that made sense. Oh. Subscribe because I don't like Rings of Power. What if I did like it? Would you have left the channel? I don't mind if people like it. I think it's the people who really, really overreact. Like if I blocked everyone who liked if I blocked everyone who liked Rings of Power from the channel, I'd be a bit of an arsehole. So I don't mind people liking it. I don't mind people hating it, but it's when that becomes the discourse. No, it's just people who can't hear anything bad about it, just arguing against people who can't appreciate anything about it, and they just argue and argue and argue. I can't really be bothered with that. Tessa, hello. Tessa asks, how did I get interested in Tolkien? I think I covered this in a Q&A video. One of them, I think the first one's the personal question one. I don't need to link it or anything like that, but how did I get interested in Tolkien? I was always into fantasy stories, and I used to write them when I was really young. And I actually remember we had a PC when I was really young. I got into computers quite early, and I used to type these really generic fantasy stories. I remember printing them out and I like, go and read my story, and it was like 5 pages long, that kind of thing. So I always liked dragons and monsters and all that kind of stuff. And I remember family members actually saying, read Lord of the Rings, and I just didn't do it. And it was a year before the first film came out, and I saw a trailer. I saw the teaser trailer in the cinema, and it blew my mind, basically. I thought, this looks like the best thing ever. And my birthday's in December, and I ended up getting the books. I've still got them, 3-volume set. And I read it twice before the film came out. And well, the films are great, and I love the films, but that kind of changed things. And unfortunately, even though I read a lot, I don't just read Tolkien. I'm always reading Tolkien, but I don't just read him. Unfortunately, when it comes to fantasy stuff, I find it really difficult. I like a lot of sci-fi. I like a lot of really old fantasy and sci-fi stuff. I read like Conan, I'll read H.G. Wells stuff. But the stuff that came after Tolkien, I've not found anything I like yet. It's been pretty difficult. It's like Tolkien's this unbelievable standard, and it's just grown. There was a little period where I didn't really read it much, but then I get into my 20s again. It was just Tolkien, and it's grown and grown. So in a way, I've got to thank Peter Jackson for getting me into Tolkien, which I never thought I'd say, but it's pretty much the truth. And I'll just skip down because our very generous moderator has gifted some memberships. So even though she says she would unsubscribe if I liked Rings of Power, thank you very much for that very generous gift. And you can all go and watch my members only videos now that you're members. Where was I? I'm absolutely terrible at following this chat. I spend far too long answering questions. Enoch Inspired says that he watched a video from Girl Next Gondor about the Curse of Turin by Melkor. Will I be covering that curse? There's another member of the channel, Aelin, who's here, who will probably be nodding away at this one because I'm quite sure that's a video that she really, really wants me to make. And yes, I will. I will make that. Girl Next Gondor is, I'll say, partly to blame for me not doing it so far. It's been the case a few times where I've really wanted to make a video and then she's made the video, and I end up not wanting to make it for a while, at least, partly because I don't want it to seem like I'm ripping her off, and I want to have my own thoughts about it. But the curse, That whole concept, that whole story is one of my favorites. And yeah, I will cover it. I want to cover it in depth. I think I did talk about this with Lexi on one of her videos. I'm sure I did. We talked about the curse and if Morgoth had that power, or if it was a curse that happened uh, because of Turin's actions. So in a way, Melkor still got his way, even though it wasn't what he intended, and that kind of thing. I think that's really interesting. And yeah, I will make a video about that. It's just it's one of these ones where I really want it to be a good one because Lexi did make a good one, and I'd really hate it if it was a really poor video by comparison. I'd like it to be maybe a video that people would watch after watching that one, or something like that. So, yeah, that will be a video. Mentellect, who I think disagrees with everything I say. I don't think I've ever agreed with him in any comment ever, and this is no exception. He says that the Ringwraiths are a plot device with a massive hole, just like the eagles not flying the ring to Mount Doom. Haha. The Eagles. The Eagles are a strange one. It's one of these. It's one of these ones where, yeah, if you just read the Lord of the Rings, it's not explained. No, I know there are explanations, but not in the Lord of the Rings. I think that's important here. Everyone who provides these real reasons why the Eagles wouldn't fly the ring to Mount Doom are really getting them from letters and Silmarillion and these other sources, which I'm fine with. I do that as well. So I think if you did just read the Lord of the Rings, you could say this, but why would you just do that? I think to say that the eagle is not flying the ring to Mount Doom is ignoring all the reasons in the Legendarium why they wouldn't fly it to Mount Doom. And it's not a plot hole. Though I do think that it would have been really good if Tolkien, I've always said this, just one line in the Council of Elrond about the eagles would have stopped decades of talk about this being a plot hole. It's unfortunate. Just can you imagine now the way they talk about Tom Bombadil in the council, and they say, "Oh, give him the ring," and then Gandalf's like, "No." I think that bit's quite funny in the Council of Elrond. It's like every single time they talk Tom Bombadil, I think all of Gandalf's lines all start with "No," as if I wish you would all stop talking about him. You don't understand him. I just wish that someone said, "What about Gwaihir and the Eagles?" And then Gandalf just said in 2 sentences that they wouldn't do that. There you go. That would have been it. And Tolkien didn't do it. It's unfortunate. And Glowing asks, why were the Nazgûl sure they'd won and didn't need to do more after stabbing Frodo? Why weren't they worried about Aragorn or one of the others stealing the ring from him or taking it if he fell? It's that, well, as always, it's the arrogance of evil, isn't it? It's the Nazgûl stab Frodo. They don't understand how hardy hobbits are, or Frodo. They see him as he's just a weak halfling. They don't really know what they are. They probably thought within a day he'd come crawling back to give them the ring, and they were arrogant. They were mistaken. How long Frodo held out after being stabbed, it would have even surprised them, and they were clearly wrong about it. You're probably suspecting stab them, let them run away, and then go after them straight away. But yeah, they thought they thought that was enough. It's all these evil figures do. They really make stupid decisions like that. But as for Aragorn taking it or something like that, that would just reveal to Sauron where the ring was and where to get it. Aragorn could use the ring. He could definitely start mustering armies and that kind of thing, but the War of the Ring isn't in full flow yet. And if Aragorn took the ring this early, this is my speculation here, I should say, but I think it would really be a bad move, and Sauron would get it back. I think it's the wrong time for him to do that. Plus, they didn't really know much about Aragorn, I'm suspecting as well. And yeah, I'm not saying this is bad writing or anything like that. I don't know what your thoughts are on that, but I've always thought that they stabbed Frodo. That's it. Frodo was going to fade and bring the ring back to them. They probably thought it was a brilliant plan, and they didn't suspect that Frodo would hold out for so long. And that's why they're so desperate when they're attacking Frodo and everyone else on the way to the way to Imladris. They're so desperate to get it. It's nearly going to a place where they can't actually get it, and they probably knew they made a mistake there, and then they have to go back to Mordor and shame. But yeah, the stupidity of evil, that's the reason I would give. Some arguments about the Eagles in a plot hole. Johanna asks who I think has the worst name in Arda, both the look and the meaning. Meaning, that's an interesting one. I need to think about the meaning one. That's whose name has a meaning that's just the worst. The look has to be telepornal, of course. I don't know how anyone would debate that. I don't know what you think. I'm interested what you think, especially the meaning one. Maybe the chat can throw some suggestions out for that. But whose name is, when you translate it, it's like, that's absolutely terrible. But for the look, it has to be telepornal. But how was Gandalf? How was Tolkien to know? Gargamel. Did Fingolfin have any chance of defeating Melkor? Besides, did he know he was practically committing suicide? I think I talk about this one. I've got a Heroes of the First Age video, Fingolfin, and I talk about this because I think people were surprised I was calling him a hero because of this apparent suicide. We're going to Angband. I'm not going to win. And it's a desperation move. I think he's heroic for even attempting it. But did he have any chance of defeating Melkor? Not according to the Valar. No elf is going to defeat a Valar. But you have to also remember that a lot of the time when they talk about Melkor, they're talking about Melkor as in mighty and grand Melkor, not this kind of shriveled thing that it becomes later. But yeah, it wasn't Fingolfin's fate to defeat Melkor. It wasn't the elves' fate to defeat him. And does that mean that I'm saying there's absolutely no chance he'd ever defeat Melkor? Well, defeat in a battle, but not for the war, possibly, maybe. A very, very, very slight chance. I say very, very slight, okay, but there's always a chance with hope, isn't there? But it depends depends on your view, I guess. It's, I don't want to say a fool's hope, but no, Melkor, that's the important part here. Even if Melkor thought, well, there's no chance this guy can defeat me, he didn't have that in his head. He was scared, and he did get wounded. It wasn't this case of, well, I can't lose and I'm just going to go out and stomp him. He overpowered him in the end, but he was really suffering during it. So, you know, if we take fate out of the equation, maybe, but fate is there, isn't it? And the Valar weren't wrong. And I think he did know that he was practically committing suicide. There's a great act of desperation. No, he thinks these people are gone, they can't win, and he has to represent them and just openly challenge the one that's wiping them out. Probably knowing that he's challenging, Morgoth, and he's not going to survive it. But the part I think is heroic is that he did it anyway. He had to show that you make a stand against evil and don't let it run free. And Fingolfin doing that actually aids in Melkor's defeat later. So I'd say maybe a slight chance, but he knew that he wasn't going to walk away from Angband. Crafty Spirit, hello. This is a good question. I've actually got this on my big list, my infamous list of ideas. Does any weapon that touches an Nazgul break? Can they be wounded by ordinary weapons without being softened up first by enchanted blades? Well, spoilers for the video I'm making, but this is a huge misconception, I think, anyway, where everyone thinks, like, maybe say in the chat if you think this, but people think that everything that stabs a Nazgul will break. And that's not what the text says. It only talks about weapons breaking with the Witch King, and that's because the Witch King's special. He's a cut above the rest of the Nazgul, and when they talk about forging these weapons to fight the Witch King, it's the men of Westerness, but the men of the North for the Witch King of Angmar. That's who they're doing it for. It's never said it's for the Nazgul as a whole. And when Aragorn talks about blades breaking when they strike, it's the king, it's the Witch King. So that's what the video is about. I've not written it out or anything. I've got some notes, but I think that's what the question I'm answering is. Can you actually strike the Nazgul with weapons? And I say you can, but the Witch King is something different, and weapons do break when they strike him. But I find it very interesting to, he says all blades, and I think I started writing that stuff out because I wondered if Andariel would break if it struck the Witch King, or if Galandring struck the Witch King, would they break? And I remember talking with people like this before, and they were saying, no, they're first stage blades, they couldn't break. I don't think that's a good enough reason. Or they're able to stab Balrogs. Why couldn't they stab the Witch King? And I don't like that either, because that's doing this power ranking thing where if you can stab a Balrog, you can stab the Witch King, and I don't think that makes much sense. So I would say any weapon that touches an Nazgul does not break, but possibly for the Witch King, if we believe Aragorn's words. Aragorn's not always right as well, remember. Stari's back. So if Sauron had died in his fight with Luthien and Huan, would he have ever been able to take physical form again? I think so, yeah. They do say he'd go crawling back to Morgoth basically as a maimed spirit and all of that. I still think at this time, remember, there's a huge difference with Sauron at this time and later. We're talking about diminishment through self-incarnation and relying on that form and how much evil you've performed in it and how long you've been inhabiting it. There's big differences between First Age Sauron and Third Age Sauron. But Sauron the First Age, yeah, he could take shape again, but it'd probably take a long time to do. Or he'd probably, I think Tolkien was implying with the text that Morgoth would have to help him in some way, which I find quite interesting. It's Sauron kind of crawling back to him like, fancy giving us a hand here, and Morgoth maybe punishing him by not doing it, and Sauron trying to muster the will to take shape again, or something like that. But yeah, I think he would be able to take shape again. It's a very different circumstance, but I think he would be discarnate for quite a while. Yeah, that's what I think. Plixiplox back with, of everyone that asked questions, I think you ask some of the toughest ones, the ones that I really should just make videos about them, because I always think I don't get enough time to answer in these streams. This is a good one. Yes, or she, I don't know if you're a male or female. Did Celebrimbor have the ability to put some of his soul in the three rings? Could Sauron have taught him that, or do you need to be a powerful Maiar or greater to imbue an object with soul? That's a good question. I kind of link this to Fëanor more than Sauron with the One Ring. Do you think part of Fëanor went into the Silmarils, where he's being literal when he says that he'll die if they're broken? I don't think he would, but maybe his will would seem broken. It would be heartbreaking, basically, and no elves can die of a broken heart, as we know. But I don't think it's the same thing as with Sauron. Sauron actually placed the greatest part of his natural power into the ring for specific reasons, for domination and that kind of thing. I don't think Celebrimbor did, but it's almost like his strength of will is going into it, but he's not displacing it, if that makes sense. He's a great figure, and I think that means he created great rings. But did that mean he removed the power that was natural to him to put into the rings? I don't think so. But I do think that, personally, I've no proof of this, I think that Celebrimbor most likely felt that the power went out of the three rings when the One Ring was unmade, that kind of connection with all the rings. But I don't think Sauron would have taught him, because obviously the three rings were made when Sauron wasn't there. He didn't know they were getting made. And if Sauron had taught him, we'd basically be saying that the other great rings would have part of Celebrimbor in them or something like that. And then does it make much sense to think of 19 rings having part of Celebrimbor's will in them? I don't think so. But yeah, I think on this one more, but I like that idea. I like the idea of part of Celebrimbor's will being in the rings, but not necessarily being removed from him. Because I think if it was removed from him, we're kind of making them more evil than they are intended to be, I think. Shepherd of the Forest is back again. how long does it usually take me to read through Lord of the Rings? Am I a fast reader? I used to read it a lot faster, but I kind of stretch out every word now. When I read it now, I actually read it out loud. The last 10 times or something I've read it, I do it out loud, which I think is a really, really good way of doing it. So if you can do that, I recommend it. And how long does it take? How long does it take me to read? Maybe a couple of months. I kind of drag it out a bit. I don't rush it at all. So I can be a fast reader, but I'm not with Lord of the Rings. But I tend to get through it. I tend to do it like twice a year or something now. So fast enough, but I wouldn't recommend rushing through it. That's what I'm trying to say. It's soaking in the atmosphere, enjoying it, because you just, I don't know if other people feel sad when you get to the Grey Havens, but then you can just go back to the beginning, can't you? Enoch, inspired again. Oh, he's replying to someone else. Morgoth versus the Morgoth. I don't understand that concept and meaning. I can explain that one. It's to do with Morgoth as an independent being and Morgoth as a entire force, a kingdom of Morgoth. So Morgoth has servants and devices, and he's put his power into the earth. But there's also the being that's Morgoth. So there's a difference. That's the whole thing. So in Morgoth Ring, Tolkien's basically saying that the Valar as a group could not defeat Morgoth as an individual. He kept defeating them. And they only managed to defeat him once he started spreading his power to his devices. So Sauron does that in a way, and even Saruman does that in a way. But Morgoth does it in a very big way. So he does it with Morgoth's ring, but we're also talking about imbuing others with his power. He's giving them authority and gifts of power and all this stuff. So the Sauron and Balrogs and orcs and trolls and all these evil things that he makes or aids become part of the concept of Morgoth, but it means that you can then separate them. You can defeat the devices of Morgoth, which actually has an effect on the individual, and you can defeat the individual, which has an effect on the others. So it's the Valar are then able to chain Morgoth after they handle his servants and devices, which Tolkien says they managed to do quite easily. And that's when they go into Manwe goes into Angband and is very surprised at how diminished Morgoth is as a being, because before Morgoth would quite easily defeat all of them on his own, and he diminishes as a being, but Morgoth's ring grows in power. That's what it means. So even though he can be defeated as an individual, you cannot defeat the kingdom of Morgoth because it's everywhere. So in a way, he kind of wins, but he doesn't get to revel in his victory. Some other people have already answered. That's how far back I am in the chat. Thank you for the nice comment. 40 years. Yep, you've read Tolkien longer than I've been alive. And yeah, Tolkien's the only fantasy read. I'm always wanting recommendations. I'm always trying, and I just never like anything. I'm far too picky with it. But I'll always take recommendations. If anyone has good fantasy they recommend, I'll certainly give it a shot. Mm. Hello, Lord Tilperion. Why did the Valar allow him, that's Morgoth, to walk free in Valinor? Because while he was separated from his creatures, he was now a near peer to the Valar and not much further. Oh, sorry, you're answering that. I thought you were asking me why they allowed him to walk free. There's also, I wouldn't say it was necessarily just that. It's I look very orange. What's going on here? I'm really orange looking. They have to. This is the whole pity and mercy thing that a lot of people don't get. They'll say when they placed Melkor in Mandos, why didn't they just lie to him and say we'll let you out in 3 ages, but then keep him there forever because no one can escape Mandos? And I just always ask, did you read Tolkien at all? If you're thinking the Valar would do that, it's even though the Valar make mistakes, it's their duty to be good and forgive and offer chances, even if we're saying, but there's no chance he was ever going to repent. And it's like, you have to give him the chance, though. So when Melkor says, okay, I'm sorry, I'm going to change, even if they're thinking, are you really going to change? They have to offer the chance to have him change. And yeah, it's unfortunate that when he breaks his promises, loads of people die and everything. I get that as well, but it's the nature of the Valar. They have to do that, and that's why Melkor can walk free in Valinor. It's like, well, you've said you're not going to do anything. Um, Here's your chance to prove it, and he fails miserably, like we all expected. Random box. Hope I'm not annoying, but I still wish to know your thoughts if Sauron believed himself a good guy, if totalitarian, or he abandoned all pretenses once he got drowned. I don't think these evil figures ever think that they're evil. I always wonder that with well written evil characters think they're doing the right thing. And he had good motives at a time before the forging of the rings, but he used those rings as a way to get control himself. The idea of power in these rings, which is easily corruptible, as Tolkien says, definitely corrupted Sauron. Of course it did. And he starts to think, I know best. I have the most power, which means I'm right. It's a very just look at the way Saruman talks in the Lord of the Rings. It's very much like that, where I know better than everyone. I'm the greatest, so what I say is right because I am the greatest. It's that sort of attitude where we have to think of it in terms of like a deity, thinking that it's so beyond our comprehension how massive the ego of Sauron was that he believed that everything he was doing, even if people were dying, even if people were suffering for it, it was for their good because it was good for him. That's what we're dealing with. So I don't know if we're really saying he believed he was a good guy, but he didn't think he was bad. His way is the right way. And that's why I think that when we're in the Lord of the Rings and we're hearing the mouth of Sauron say things like, uh, "You can keep your lands, but you'll be paying tribute to Sauron and all that kind of stuff." That's I think he's been genuine there. Like, it's obviously terrible, right? If we end up letting these lands exist, there's going to be some governor or whatever there. It's probably the Mouth of Sauron or a Ringwraith or something like that, and you're going to be slaves to Sauron. But I think he's right there. He's not just saying it to get what he wants. He wants to control people and rule over them. He doesn't want to kill everyone. And I would say that he thought himself right rather than a good guy, and that leads to totalitarianism. And once he was drowned, you're talking about after Numenor, he thought he was even more on the right because he thought Eru had punished uh, men. That's why he thought Eru changed the world. It was, well, the Valar and Eru have abandoned Middle Earth. I'm still here and I'm the greatest one, so I must be able to do what I want. And he was completely wrong. They hadn't abandoned it, they just changed their approach. So I could talk a lot more about this, but I'm falling behind the chat again, but it's a very good question. I'll answer this one from Cal. I like your picture. Other than Peter Jackson, who would be my pick to direct new films? I like Robert Eggers, but I don't know. I don't know the answer to this one, but I will say I don't want Peter Jackson involved. Now, I want to explain that before people start throwing vegetables at me in the street. But I have no problem with Peter Jackson. Um, I think Rings of Power shows that if the wrong people are in charge of it, it can go very wrong. And uh, for the flaws that are in Peter Jackson's movies, there's plenty of them. I really like the movies though. I just have a problem because there's this attitude now where Peter Jackson has to be involved in everything Middle Earth. He's pretty much getting equated with Tolkien. He has to be involved, has to be producing it, he has to be directing it, has to be writing it, he has to consult on it. It has to be filmed in Middle Earth, has to be filmed in New Zealand. And I just think he's directed 6 films, 3 of them are good. Can someone else have their vision of Middle Earth? Now, I don't know who. I know you're asking me directly who. I don't know what Robert Eggers would be like doing Lord of the Rings or a story like this, but I'd be interested in seeing it. But I can't pick a name out that I'd be like, I'd love to see that. But I don't want it to be Peter Jackson. We've seen his vision of it. 6 films. Can someone else just do it? Can someone else who's passionate about it put their vision forward and we can see what that's like? I don't like this idea of when there's like a concept art or something for Middle Earth, people say, well, they don't look like that. And they're comparing it to Peter Jackson. Well, not everything Peter Jackson did was right. You know, for one thing, I think people have got really confused by elves. Um, Peter Jackson kind of made every elf be like a high elf. They'll they'll whisper and they'll look like they're glowing and they'll look as if they're floating when they walk. And elves aren't all like that. Um, I know that's a really specific thing to pick out, but that's a big thing because of Rings of Power with how the elves look in that. But uh, Peter Jackson is not 100% accurate with how he showed everything, and we shouldn't just set that as the standard for all time that everything has to look like that or it sucks. So I'd like to see someone else do something if they're going to do it, which they will, because it will make them a lot of money. Jeez, I'm so far behind the chat. This thing always happens where people leave when they've asked a question. I feel bad because I've not been able to answer in time. Hello, Ryan. Ryan asks, why did Sauron die when the ring was destroyed? I understand most of his power was in it, but doesn't he still have the power of his own? Power of his own new physical form. Okay, so yep, I've released 2 videos recently about Sauron and death and all of that. So if people are confused about Ryan saying Sauron died, I highly recommend watching them. For I'm talking about death in a very specific way in the Legendarium. To me, death in the real world isn't the same as Middle Earth because I don't believe in a eternal spirit or anything like that. A lot of people do, but in the Legendarium, it exists. That's the way it's written. So Sauron, you have answered it. You have answered it here, though. That's the point. Uh, I understand most of his power was in it. That's the rub here. So most of Sauron's power went into the ring, and that was completely removed from him forever when the ring was destroyed. And what was left was so diminished that taking shape, which is what he would need to do, because he'd been so accustomed to taking physical shape now to interact with the physical world, his will was so diminished because of the removal of that power forever that he couldn't even do that. That's how much went into the ring. So Tolkien's not lying when he says most. He's meaning, really, really most. If that ring is ever completely taken from him or destroyed, Sauron's screwed basically. And it's not like I'll put a little bit in and I'll get a little bit more power or something. It's a huge sacrifice to do it. And it backfired when the ring was unmade. So yeah, he does still have his spirit. He still exists. He's there, but he's so diminished now that just even taking physical shape in the world is too difficult for him to do. And as Tolkien says as well in letters, every time Sauron dies, a little bit of that will goes as well. It takes him longer to come back each time. And this was just a huge deal when the ring was unmade. There's no coming back from it, basically. But as people did point out in the videos, I didn't really mention it in the video. There's this talk of Sauron coming back in Dagor-Dagorath. I didn't mention it because anytime I mention Dagor-Dagorath, I need to get into Tolkien's thoughts on it, Christopher Tolkien's thoughts on it, if it would be carried forward, if it really matters what would happen in it. So I just left it out. But yeah, it's completely fine to think that in the end, probably through Morgoth, Sauron could return. But I'm just going through what the Lord of the Rings says, and he wouldn't return in that case. Oh, and as other people you're talking about why he immediately died again. Well, you could think of it in a couple of ways. As people said, you could think of Barad-dur just collapsing and him being destroyed that way, or you could think of everything that was wrought with the ring being unmade, and even though we didn't have the ring at the time, the ring existing could in some way affect the shape that Sauron had taken, or something like that. So when the ring was unmade, Sauron was forced from that physical form, something like that. And Enoch inspired again. Applying power ranking and power scaling to J.R.R. Tolkien's world of Arda can be a tricky thing to do in an accurate and correct format. I'd go as far as to say it's impossible to do, and you shouldn't bother. There's hierarchy, of course. The Valar, by definition, are greater. You could say more powerful if you want, but they're greater than all of the Maiar. There's some who are nigh as great as the Valar, Tolkien says, but by definition, the Valar are the greatest. And make of that what you will. But when it started going below that, I think it's just really weird that people do this all the time. What is power? Power scaling. It leads to all that talk of, well, that figure can't defeat that figure because that figure is this race and this figure is that race. What's the point even reading it or having any interest in it if it's all set out like that? I like the idea that an elf can go toe to toe with a Vala. Or no, I still think that if Fingolfin was around in the Third Age, he would, in battle, if you're talking about battles, he would defeat Sauron. I don't think there's any question of that. But then people say, oh, but he's a Maiar. And I'm like, yeah, but that doesn't mean he's got battle prowess or anything like that. That's the problem with power rankings and power scalings. It all comes down to battles, and I don't think that's what the whole thing's about. But it ends up descending into that when you bring this stuff up. And would it make sense to people that I say Sauron is more powerful than Fingolfin, but Fingolfin would defeat Sauron in battle? I don't think it's really connected that way, Guitars away from the radiator. They're not as close as it looks. They're actually like quite a distance away. It looks like an optical illusion here. The guitars are perfectly fine. That was just this part from Melkor himself, Oliver. Catching up. I'm catching up. George asks if I liked Rings of Power. I don't. But, or did I like it? No, I didn't. But I talked about that at the beginning of the stream. Someone else asked that, what are my thoughts on it, and I think it wasn't a very good show. I'll watch the second season just to see if it improves, but I don't have very high hopes for it at all. I don't think it's related to Tolkien and much else except the names that are getting used. Just finding the next question. Let me just check something here. Sorry about that. think someone's mentioned the thinking I've enjoyed the weather because I look really red. I'm not actually really red. I think I'm just warm in here. I'm white as a sheet, to be honest. I'm never out in the sun, so I think I just look like I'm sunburnt, but I'm honestly not. Uh, Cheeky, if I get this far. Lorentz factor. How many times did Manwe forgive Melkor? How great a flaw in Manwe's character was his inability to perceive deception? Well, his inability to perceive deception would only happen once, wouldn't it? Until he's deceived, which Melkor did. So it's Manwe's not stupid. He's innocent of it, but we're only innocent until we're introduced to it. So after it's happened to Manwe, he would certainly be able to perceive it, I think. And a flaw in his character, well, yeah, it's I can see why you'd see it that way. I think Tolkien is going for um, the purity angle here. It's Manwe is so pure and good that he doesn't know evil or deception and lies because, as I just said, he's never lied, he's never deceived, he never had it done to him until it happened. But he has to suffer that to then understand it. And I don't want to say it's a flaw. It's a bit harsh on Manwe. Obviously, some bad decisions could be made, but as I said earlier, even if he could perceive deception, he still has to offer chances. That's what Tolkien says. It's hard for us to understand, and that's what Tolkien's saying. We shouldn't judge Manwe because he's King of Arda. We might not like to hear it, but he's far above us, and we can't know all ends for all the decisions that Manwe makes. So yeah, if Melkor kept on asking for forgiveness and Manwe was deciding to do it, we might want vengeance or something. But Manwe doesn't think that way until it becomes obvious that Melkor is so far gone, and that's pretty much when Eru steps in, and it's a case of he needs to be removed from the world basically through the door of night, and that's with the blessing of Eru to do that, and that's the last resort. It's reached this stage where every single person just suffering under Melkor, and how many times can you forgive him? We see it a very, not in a lesser way, in Lord of the Rings, like we do. There's loads of parallels. I think the Gandalf Saruman's a very good way to look at that. How many times does Saruman um, get offered a chance from Gandalf, and he just spits in his face, and he's too proud and arrogant to accept it, and it ends up leading to his death. But even even after the destruction of the ring, where Saruman can do harm to the Shire, but he can't really do any harm to Gandalf. Gandalf's still offering him the chance. That's learning from the likes of Manwe. That's what makes Gandalf good. It's what makes Manwe good. We can't see these as flaws if you're offering evil figures a chance of redemption, even if you think they're not going to take it. That's what makes them good. And it's kind of a shame that we end up seeing it as being a flaw. Like, I've actually had people ask me, why didn't Gandalf just kill Saruman? Gandalf wouldn't do that. Gandalf wouldn't do that. Grima Wormtongue would do that. And yeah, we get it, George. You keep saying Eru's the evil here. I don't agree with it. It's like it or loathe it, Tolkien wrote the story. Eru isn't evil to Tolkien. It's by definition, he can't be evil. And you don't have to believe in God or anything. I don't, but it's not my Legendarium, is it? Eru exists in it, and he's good. May not understand how that goodness works, but I've never liked that. Well, he's the real evil one. Melkor is misunderstood and everything. I've had quite a few comments recently of people interpreting the story their own way, which is fine. If you want to read it that way, definitely go for it. But I wouldn't say that was Tolkien's intention at all. Well, it's usually followed up with that. It created Morgoth. Well, it created Melkor, and it gave everyone free will. So Melkor is to blame for becoming Morgoth. It's not Eru. Unless we say absolutely everything is anything good that anyone does, we say, well, that was Eru. You have to say it that way then, because if you're blaming all evil stuff on Eru, why not all the good stuff as well? It's you can't give free will and then take it back when you don't like the results. That doesn't make much sense. And yeah, even if we're thinking these definitions of God and gods, where we say he knew the outcome because he's timeless, he's outside of time, it doesn't mean that he's taken away the choice. You might know what choice you're going to make, but you still need to make the choice. It's quite a tough concept. I can't explain it. It's people have been thinking about this for thousands of years. But yeah, I just see it as you give free will, that sets a standard for what's good, which would be following the path of Eru. But you are free to not follow that path and suffer the consequences. And we then can't say, well, Eru's to blame then, because Morgoth used his free will to turn from Eru. It was Morgoth's choice. So Eru's outside of everything, isn't he? XNT 22. What have I imagined Sauron's personality like? I always imagined him in his fair form, charismatic, egotistical person, finds amusement in looking down others. Well, this is a problem. Well, not a problem. I don't want to say it wrong here. But when we think of fair form Sauron, I always like to think that he's not just fair in his appearance, otherwise it wouldn't work. I can't remember where I was speaking about this. I'm sure I was talking to someone recently about Annatar. But I didn't get that people were seeing Annatar as, with these like negative traits. I wish I really remembered where I was talking about this, but I think they were talking about how he corrupted the elves and how he got them to do this or that. And I thought it made no sense that people were thinking that he looked fair, but he had his own personality. Because I think elves would see right through that. If Sauron was being himself while he was in a fair form, then he's not really in a fair form. It's just Sauron looking nice, and that's different. When I think of Sauron in a fair form, appearing fair, his personality changes. He hides it. That he must hide it. He might be egotistical, because a lot of elves are egotistical. They're not perfect. Charismatic, certainly, but he has to fool all but the most, no, no, the greatest elves, the one with the keen eye, the keen sense to know that something's wrong with this figure, like the likes of Galadriel. But all these, other elves should be tricked by him. He should seem really confident and knowledgeable, certainly powerful, of course, and willing to share that knowledge. That's a bit of another parallel, a bit like when Morgoth appeared as Melkor, fair to the first men, where he's willing to give them loads of information and knowledge, sharing his gifts, getting them all to uh, believe him and start trusting him, and that just becomes all sinister and starts turning into worship. Well, don't you appreciate all these gifts I've given you? If you want to keep getting them, you have to do this. It's like classic corruption. And I see something similar with Sauron. He has to offer these elves all this knowledge that ordinarily he wouldn't want to give them, but he's got an ulterior motive. He's going to go and make the One Ring. So I think he has to really, really appear as this fair emissary of the Valar, as Tolkien says, in anticipation of the Istari, the wizards. And that would be Sauron, one of the greatest feats, I think, of Sauron in Middle-earth, pretending he's not this evil figure that wants to dominate them, shielding that from elves. And he managed to do it for all except a few of them. But there's always exceptions. And yeah, I think later when you say finds amusement in looking down on others, he'd hide that from them, of course, but he must have went back to Mordor, skipping back to Mordor thinking he was great for what he'd achieved. And it still backfired on him. But yeah, I think you're right about what you're saying about his personality, but we have to also be careful about not distinguishing fair Sauron from terrible Sauron. There has to be a difference, otherwise he's not fair. It's not just how he looks. Mr. C. This might be a response to something I said earlier. Aware of his evilness in the end, when the people went to war against him and cut off his finger, he embraced it. Yeah, you're right. But again, aware of evilness. I still don't think he would be, because they don't think Morgoth didn't think he was evil. The most evil figure that ever existed in Arda wouldn't think he was evil. Cartoon villains call themselves evil, and Sauron embraced the tyrannical Sauron. No, it's pretty much a case of, I've tried through this method with the rings, it failed, they keep fighting me, okay, I'm going to defeat them then through sheer power and might. If that's embracing evilness, then you're right, but I think it's more, I'm just going to go to war with them and they will bow to me through force. It won't have to be through rings of power, and anyone that stands against me will be defeated. That's the I'm Morgoth returned kind of era of Sauron. But I'm just against this idea of him sitting there in Barad-dur saying I'm evil. And I don't want to say it's like Anakin from Star Wars, where it's like, from my point of view, the Valar are evil. I don't think it'd be like that. But do we really think these evil figures think they're evil? Like, again, I keep talking about other characters. Think of Saruman in The Lord of the Rings. That whole speech she gives with Gandalf failing Numenor and elves leaving Middle Earth. Does Saruman think he's evil there? I don't think he does. Everything he's saying is pretty evil. He's revealing all this evil stuff that he's been doing and what he plans. But he thinks he's in the right. He thinks, why aren't you joining me? Why aren't you getting on board with this? Because he thinks he's in the right. And That's what makes them interesting characters. It's less about I'm doing evil. It's more my way is right, and I'm going to bend the will of others to agree with me. I don't think they're thinking in terms of good and evil. But again, that's just the way I read it. I'm not saying you're wrong, but it's just that use of the word evil. I don't think they would think of themselves that way. Duke Valentine. I've been seeing quite a lot of comments coming in. Sorry, Duke Valentino. Why has Tolkien been labelled as far right? I didn't know he had been labelled as far right. I've no idea. Something to do with Northern Europe traditions, maybe. European mythology, Western mythology, people's view on race with the Easterlings and the orcs and all that kind of thing. I'm guessing it's those reasons, but yeah, I don't know. I'm not really up in politics, and I know that a lot of people say Tolkien's racist and that sort of thing, but far right, that's I was going to say far right. That's a bit extreme, obviously, but I mean, calling Tolkien far right, that just makes no sense. If read anything from and uh, listen to his interviews and his own politics now, far right is just. I don't know if that's just a modern thing where you're either one or the other, aren't you? But uh, I think people labeling Tolkien as far right are pretty idiotic, in my opinion. And Mrs. Manrique, yeah, you're given a. You're right here. You said if Melkor repented before messing with the beloved firstborn, beloved firstborn, a little bit of bitterness there, he would have been easily forgiven like a teenager who'd drawn on his bedroom wall. He repented only after going too far. That is what evil figures do as well, isn't it? It's Melkor is mightiest and uh, the grand Melkor, Morgoth, tyrant of the world, until the roof of his fortress is getting ripped off and he's about to get dragged out of there. When each time he realizes he's defeated and he can't do anything about it, that's when he's suddenly asking for forgiveness. And the last time is like you say, he's went too far. It's too late now. They've already been given like permission to drag him back again, and they're not going to forgive him. That by that time, it's obviously he's just doing it to try and get out of the responsibility. It's not genuine, and um, that's what evil figures do. It's uh, see if you can get out of it when it's too late. Nicholas, any thoughts on the Tolkien film? I think it was well done. The romance war story of Tolkien's early life is its own fantasy. I kind of like that part, like you say. I didn't really like it though as a film. Not just for the accuracy or anything though, but it's these biopics or biopics, however you want to pronounce it. I think they're all the same. They've all got that uh, about sanctimonious and the figure they talk about is always like really high praise. Like a good example. would be the Stephen Hawking one, Theory of Everything. You know, there was cheese oozing out of my TV when I was watching that. It's just Stephen Hawking wasn't perfect, wasn't the nicest guy in the world, you know, and that's what these films all end up being like. It's and I know this, I'm talking about Tolkien. I'm not saying Tolkien's a bad guy or anything like that, but all these films just feel the same way when I watch them, and the Tolkien one was like that. It's the music they use, and it's as if they're all made by the same people, and I didn't like it. I prefer Tolkien documentaries about his life than uh, films. And something like, never thought I'd say this, but I found it very weird that I was watching the Tolkien film and it's almost like he wasn't a Catholic as well. That's really weird. Um, I've no love for Catholics or religion or anything like that, but it's Tolkien we're talking about. We wouldn't have the Legendarium without Tolkien's faith. Um, how can they? How could they not talk about that? It's obvious that there's some committee making this film, and they go, "Well, we can't talk about that." No, you can only talk about Catholics if it's a film like Spotlight or something like that. You can't talk about it in a Tolkien film. People won't come and see it and all that. It's something like that, and that's strange. So they focused on like the love story, the war, as you were saying, but very strange that something so fundamental and important to this man was completely left out, which makes it almost pointless to watch. And I'll answer this in a second. I'm not peeing into glass. Getting thirsty. Yes, Radval. I hate Jackson's Mouth of Sauron design, and you see it everywhere in the art now. You've read my mind. That is why I started commissioning artwork, actually. The first artwork I commissioned was from Ralph Damiani. Highly recommend checking him out. I use quite a lot of his stuff. And I was making a video, 3 theories about the Mouth of Sauron, and every bit of artwork about from the Mouth of Sauron was just that really stupid design from the movie. I really don't like that, and I didn't want to use it. So I said, "Can you make some images of how I imagine the Mouth of Sauron?" And let's see if I've got one here, just to show. So I described what I imagined the Mouth of Sauron to be like, and there's an updated version after this. This is the old version, right? But I asked Ralph to make it, and he did. And I like it. I imagine him as being noble looking, but old and a bit kind of worn out. Kind of long, dark hair with kind of grey going through it and that thing. Numenorian look, but corrupted. I was explaining all this, and Ralph got it in one. And I like that. And I don't like that monstrous Peter Jackson design. I think it's really goofy. So yeah, it's the artwork. I'm jealous of people who can create artwork. I'd absolutely love to be able to do it, but it's a shame that so much of it is movie inspired. We don't need any more Ian McKellen Gandalf images. There's about 8 billion of them out there, and it's why I always think like the likes of Donato Giancarlo probably makes the best Gandalf artwork. It doesn't look like Ian McKellen. You can kind of, it's the same Gandalf idea, old, like kind of Odinic wanderer type look with the white beard and everything, but it's not Ian McKellen. And I'm not got a problem with Ian McKellen. It's just, do we need every Gandalf image ever to just look like him? It's a shame that they do that. Aragorn's Viggo Mortensen, Frodo's Elijah Wood, and all of that. I love the artwork that is its own, the artist's own vision of the figure. Even if I don't imagine the figure looking like that, I really appreciate that they've went out and done it their own way. And yeah, the Mouth of Sauron is probably the worst out of the lot, in my opinion. I'm falling behind the chat again. If anyone asked a question that I couldn't get to, you can always leave it in one of the videos. Yeah. I'll try and get through all the comments before I finish anyway. Who do I think is more knowledgeable about Middle-earth? Me or Stephen Colbert? I've seen some clips. I don't watch that kind of stuff, those late talk shows and that. They're not very big here, the American ones. But I've seen them talk about Tolkien and that. I think there's a difference with talking about Tolkien, like being in a pub quiz for Tolkien and being able to really discuss Tolkien. Now, I mean that in terms of I don't mean this in a bad way. There's plenty of YouTube channels talking about Tolkien where they can tell you facts about Middle Earth, and there's other ones that could share ideas about Middle Earth or something a bit more in depth or whatever. And there's every variation, all in between. Not all channels are the same, and there's nothing wrong with that. But who is then, if you're wanting to quantify it or anything, who's more knowledgeable about Middle Earth? The one that can tell you when the fourth king of Numenor reigned, or who can tell you how Tolkien tackled the problem of evil or something like that? It's I think that's what separates. I hate using the word scholar, right? It's a terrible word to use, but when people throw that word around, I think it's really to do with discussing ideas and been a bit more in depth about it. So for Stephen, I have no idea about, and this is the case with a lot of channels as well. I've no idea what they think about certain concepts because they never share their actual personal thoughts about them, their analysis of things. I'd like to actually hear it. It's why sometimes people are saying you should collaborate with insert channel A. And I go, but about what? What do you mean? Because that channel maybe does history videos or character histories or whatever we're talking about. And what would a collaboration be like? You can find all that stuff on Tolkien Gateway if you want. And yeah, Colbert, would I have him in a quiz discussing Tolkien? Of course, right? He knows a lot of stuff. But what does he actually think about, like, what does he know about Legendarium? What are his ideas? I'd love to hear them, and I never hear them. It's always just, I'll dress up as an elf and name the Valar or something like that. I'm sure everyone in this chat can name the Valar, and more knowledgeable about Middle Earth. I'm going to be extremely arrogant and say, of course, I know more about Middle Earth than Stephen Colbert. Oh, a lot of politics going on in the chat. What's going on? Ben, are super chats disabled? No, don't think so. Plixiplox sent one earlier. It's the only one that's been sent, but I've not disabled them or anything. Okay. Elena, I like all these Morgoth and Sauron questions I'm getting. Did Sauron see Morgoth as in the right, or a means to an end to gain power? It's an interesting one because a lot of people bring up the fact that Morgoth wanted to end up annihilating everything, and why would Sauron support him to that end? Sauron was elevated in power by serving Morgoth. That's the path to evil, isn't it? It's the easy way, not the right way. So he is drawn to Melkor because of what he can then achieve through Melkor. And that gives him more power, gives him more authority, and he can have his designs come to fruition faster and without friction. And that's what Sauron loves. And he grows to rely on Morgoth or Melkor, and basically worships him. He becomes obsessed by him. The hold that Morgoth has on Sauron is still there after Morgoth's taken away, and maybe the hold became it was such a hold that even when Morgoth's own motives changed, Sauron isn't going to go, well, I don't want that, and I'm going to leave him. He wouldn't be able to leave him, and that's why I think Sauron stuck around. And Sauron comes into his own once Morgoth's taken out, and he doesn't continue Morgoth's plan. He goes for his own plan, but it's in a way it's to fix what was left from Morgoth. It's quite an interesting relationship, but we have to always remember that Morgoth didn't originally want to annihilate everything. He was wanting to purely create his own will, and there must have been a time when Sauron and Morgoth were Sauron's relationship with Morgoth so great that he was been able to do what he wanted and rise in power. And like I said, that just tied him to him, where there's no chance of leaving him when Morgoth finally decides, I'm going to destroy everything. No, all his servants didn't turn on him. They're all so reliant on him that they would have went with him to the end till he destroyed them. And Sauron got away from that in a way. When Morgoth was actually cast out of the world. He still relied on him in a way. He used his name, said he was Morgoth returned. And yeah, I think you're kind of right here, though. It's not really about seeing him in the right. It's getting your own power, which by doing so, Morgoth must have been in the right because I'm getting more power from it. It's evil figures don't really trust other evil figures, do they? They're all in it for themselves. And It's just so happens that Morgoth was the greatest, the mightiest, the most powerful, greater than Sauron, and he had a hold over him because of what he had offered him and given him. I'm not really into these ones so much, the political stuff. I can see you're asking it a lot though. So, do I see a racial component in Tolkien? I don't really know. Do I think he was racist, or is race important in Tolkien? Um, I don't really know. I don't really think about this stuff. I obviously know that Tolkien wrote orcs as dark skinned. The Easterlings are from the east. They're not going to be white. The Haradrim aren't going to be white, but that's more geographical, isn't it? And I don't see them as being weaker because of their race. It's they're corrupted by Sauron. Um, these places have already been dominated and corrupted, and interestingly, from uh, Numenorian overlords and all that, that's never really brought up. And yeah, I think the people the races I focus on in Tolkien aren't really skin color races. We're talking about elves and dwarves and men, and yeah, it's something I'm not really interested in. A lot of people are obsessed about this stuff, and I've read plenty of articles with uh, people that just focus on this constantly, and it's really boring for me. I'm not really at all interested in it. Like, I'm not going to have a 50-minute debate about a Magic the Gathering card where Aragorn's black, for example. There's probably people making documentary length YouTube videos about how wrong that is, but um, doesn't change how I view Aragorn when I read the story. And if people want to obsess about it, I'd rather obsess about the text itself. Jesus, people still talking about Manwe forgiving Melkor. Is that how far back I am? Chat from 20 past. Jesus, I'm almost half an hour behind. Mm-mm-mm-mm. Ah, Radvald's back. Well, this is something I'd like to mention. He said, if Galadriel and Gil-galad didn't trust Annatar, why didn't they just assume it was Sauron? What other figure who held the powers of the Ainur would be worthy of distrust? This is something related to when people talk about Aule, the Valar Aule. They say all of his servants turned evil. Well, two of them did. Um, this seems similar to that, where you're saying what other figure held the powers of the Ainur would be worthy of distrust? Maybe loads of them. How do we know? It's Melkor didn't just have Sauron as a servant. Uh, there are plenty of evil Maiar. There had to have been. There's not just one, you know, and we don't know their full number, all their names written down and everything like that. But it seems weird to me that, if there's an evil figure who is saying he's an emissary of the West, it has to be Sauron. I don't think that is the case. We've no idea how many they may have been aware of. We may not know how many of these figures had dealings with Sauron. And we have to think about that as well. Sauron for a long time was a servant of Melkor. Melkor was the big evil. Sauron kind of hid in Middle Earth and then grew in power. We can't just look in hindsight and say, well, everyone knows who Sauron is, how evil he is, it has to be Sauron. It's not the case. And this kind of limits the Legendarium. It's a bit like when I think of Autumno and they say all these like horrors at Autumno and everyone just says, well, Balrogs, orcs and trolls. And I remember talking to an artist, Pete. It's a really cool artwork of Hurin's Last Stand. And I remember messaging him on Twitter about it, and I said, what are these things that are fighting Hurin? It was just all these like monsters that were around him. And he had this thought that was really similar to mine, which is that, well, Melkor didn't just make these creatures, he maybe made these other abominations that were wiped out, later wiped out by the Valar or something like that. And I love all that stuff. It's this kind of horror element to it. And that's just what I'm saying. It's like, have a bit of imagination and don't just think of it as Morgoth, Sauron, and some Balrogs. It's like there may have been all these other figures that were defeated and we just didn't know about them. Tolkien didn't write about every single evil figure. There are Maiar, there's evil spirits of Sauron's order. Plus, not trusting doesn't necessarily mean I think this figure is evil. There's something about this figure that I don't trust. There's something they're not telling us. Doesn't necessarily mean I think it's Morgoth's greatest servant, Sauron. It's I'd have to think if Galadriel or Gil-galad instantly thought that, things would have been different, but that's not how it was written, was it? I'm getting there, folks. Catching up. Big question. j.r.r. asked, do you think dragons have free will? And if so, how did they get it since they weren't created by Eru? Possibly independent beings that were corrupted into being dragons, meaning they already had free will. It's not Melkor giving them free will through the flaming perishable, which he couldn't do. But that's just one idea. There were already things that were that existed with independence that he corrupted. Spirits put into these creatures, as we see with werewolves and even vampires, if you want to stretch it. But I don't think I've made many videos on dragons. I keep meaning to make one about my views on dragons. I like the idea that Morgoth put a part of himself in them, and that's why they're so like him. When he needed, remember, this is a time when Balrogs weren't weren't the Balrogs from Lord of the Rings times of writing. Balrogs used to just be greater than orcs. They weren't fallen angelic spirits or anything like that. But when they were, even they weren't enough, or the orcs weren't enough to defeat the elves. It went to dragons and made them, as it says. And I just could just be my own idea. I'm not going to say I'm right about it, but I like the idea that Morgoth put his will into them. And when every time Glaurung speaks in the Silmarillion, I just imagine that's how Morgoth would speak. That wickedness, even the way he speaks, so corruptive and deceptive and overwhelming and everything. It just seems like they are creatures of Morgoth. They really seem like creatures of Morgoth. Even Smaug, thousands of years later, I just think there's a part of Morgoth in them. But I'd happily say that's just my own speculation. The best idea is probably that they were already things that existed, either the creature itself or spirits that were independent, that were put into these creatures. And that's why they have free will, because whatever was put into these corrupted creatures already had free will, and that wasn't taken away. Ryan's back. So Ryan asks, if not even Gandalf or Galadriel could defeat Sauron if he were to regain the ring, how do you think Gil-galad and Elendil managed to defeat him? The biggest reason here would be the three rings. If Sauron regains the ring, he sees everything that was done with the three rings. The three rings become basically useless to the people using them, because Sauron can start to get control over them, and both of them actually hold rings of power. But when Tolkien really talks about Gandalf and Galadriel in contest with Sauron, they're not really meaning battling him in terms of like with swords, right? It's battle of wills. That's always how I imagine the Gandalf or Galadriel in contest with Sauron. It's strength of will. It's not, like I say, banging weapons together. But Sauron's not, in terms of physical prowess and martial ability or anything, he's not incredible. No, he loses quite often in that way, but that's not where his power lies. So Gil-galad and Elendil basically force Sauron through the siege of Barad-dur to eventually come out, which seems like a bit of a mistake. He could have sat in there for as long as he wanted, but it's the sortie, as Tolkien calls it, and well, that's a real thing, but you know what I mean. He comes out, it's the final kind of attack, and the three of them fight, and they managed to defeat him, but he defeated them as well. And that's pretty good. These are two very experienced, very powerful High Kings, and they all lose, right? There's no winners. But with Gandalf and Galadriel, like I say, Tolkien's not really speaking about that in the same way. He's not speaking about, well, if Gandalf grabbed Glamdring and started swinging it at Sauron, Sauron would defeat him or anything like that. He's talking about the battle for the ring and the strength of will that Sauron would have with the ring to dominate these figures of power. It's maybe would Galadriel defeat Sauron in battle? Well, I don't think so. Not from anything I've read, but it's different. We're just talking about different contests here. That's at least how I would view that. Mr. Mirabilis. I wish Tolkien had expanded more on the Mouth of Sauron's past. Then again, the mystery is also quite appealing. Yeah, I agree with the last part. I like these unwritten histories. The idea that the person writing it in the Red Book or whatever is saying it is said that he was a renegade, a black Numenorian, and you can start filling in the gaps yourself. Would it be interesting if it was saying he was leader of this region and this happened and he served Sauron? Yeah, that would still be interesting. But no, you can fill in the story yourself. You can imagine things about this figure. I wouldn't want everything written out, but I wouldn't complain if it was written out. But I'm someone who really doesn't mind these kind of mysteries. It's unfortunate that because of these mysteries, people then start filling in those gaps in really weak ways. You know, the amount of people that think Mouth of Sauron's, a former king of Gondor or something like that, or he's a Ringwraith and all of this. It's even though it says he's not, and weak kind of fan fiction to fill in the gaps and saying, well, that I have evidence that it's true, and you're like, well, it's not. Tolkien would have written it if it was true. It's the same with the Witch King, but I'd stretch it a bit with the Witch King and say I really do wish there was something more about him. I think Mouth of Sauron's intriguing, definitely, but the Witch King, I think he's very interesting, and there's almost nothing written about him. I don't think he was a king of Numenor or anything like that, but I would have loved something about possibly being one of the king's men or some lord who went east, and just something about him. And he's so mysterious, but an important figure. It's just Mouth of Sauron is not a really, really important figure. He's in it very briefly. I'd have liked something more on the Witch King, but again, you can fill in your own gaps. More Mouth of Sauron stuff. Random Box asks, do you think the Mouth of Sauron looked too blatantly, transparently evil? Yeah, I think he should have still looked evil. No, he's a corrupted man, but not a monster. He looked like a monster. He didn't look like a man at all. Even if you look at uh, the Ringwraiths, when Frodo put on the ring and he sees these twisted shapes. Well, that's not how I imagined them, but that's cool. I like that part. But you can still kind of see that there were men, and Peter Jackson's taking the twisted kind of literally there. And with the Mouth of Sauron, it doesn't look like a man. It's like a monster. And the mouth part, it's like, well, he's the Mouth of Sauron. We'll give him a huge, stupid mouth with big, sharp teeth. And like, what were they thinking with that? And I like the image I showed earlier. I would have preferred showing the Mouth of Sauron as, I'm not saying literally make him look like Aragorn, but take a noble Numenorian figure, a tall, strong kind of man, and corrupt him. That'd have been a far better design, where you can tell that it has some noble lineage, but he's so corrupted by it, and he can still look great, but fallen. You know, it's a bit of thought behind it. Don't make him a monster. Make him kind of old, but you can tell that there's a power there from his lineage. That'd have been far better, I think. So yeah, he was too. It's not that, maybe not that he's too blatantly evil, because he should be evil, but it's they've associated evil with monstrous, and I don't think that was the right way to do it. You know, it's like Grima Wormtongue looks more like the Mouth of Sauron in my own head than who they made. Well, that figure they made the Mouth of Sauron in the films. Yeah, I'd go with that. The exorcism. Ben asks about what was the worst. The exorcism of Theoden. The worst. Was someone talking about? Oh yeah, you're talking about changes in the films, because I think Istari says the Witch King overpowering Gandalf the White. The thing I didn't like about the exorcism of Theoden is, again, maybe it's hard to do this in films, but they can't really show what Tolkien means with a power corrupting a place or something like that. Like, people wonder why Saruman is really weakened by the end of the story, and it's because his power is being spent. He's spending his power and his devices and through his evil will. It's not an infinite well of willpower. It starts to leave him, and he doesn't get to do all this stuff forever. And I like this idea of an evil will being set against them in Rohan. Not even been able to chase the Uruk-hai to their full ability. They're still doing a heroic deed, but they feel this will against them, and that's something that is quite difficult to show in a film. It must be, or Peter Jackson didn't get it or something. But it, with the Theoden exorcism thing, it's bad for two reasons. It's not really getting the power of Saruman, what he was actually doing in Rohan. It's a far more kind of sinister power, when you've got this wannabe kind of tyrant overlord setting his will against all of you, and it's having a very real effect. And it's also diminishing the corruption of Grima Wormtongue with Theoden, where it's making it seem like it's all Saruman. No, it's like, if Saruman's kind of possessed Theoden, what's Grima Wormtongue doing? Because Saruman's already kind of won, hasn't he? Until Gandalf shows up. It's Grima is the one that's corrupting him. Is poisoning him, Theoden, through actual poisons and through poisonous words, and he's just slowly but surely made Theoden think he's an old, worn out, ready to die king. And that's when it's cool, when Gandalf shows up and there's the big scene with the storm outside and the sunlight. And Theoden realizes that he's not so weak. And that's what I'm saying. The scenes in the book are showing the corruption of Saruman, the poison of Grima Wormtongue, the healing power of Gandalf through his words, and Theoden's own strength as well, realizing his own strength and helping him with the next part of the tale with Helm's Deep and all of that. That's all taken away when you just do Saruman possessed him. It's such a weak version of what actually happened. So yeah, I didn't like that part. But I think the one good thing, the effect is really cool. It still holds up. I love the makeup on Theoden, where again Peter Jackson's went literal, where he's actually made Theoden look really, really, really old, and then it kind of changes. But that's a cool scene to see. But I think it's taking it literally. Theoden would seem a bit older. He's more worn, atomic bags under his eyes and all of that. I don't think he looks like a zombie. And that you just see that kind of leave him when he realizes. I think it's more like you see it in his eyes and that kind of thing, rather than his nails get shorter and all that magically. That's just my opinion on that. Mm, 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 mm. I think this was in Callisto's talking about being more or less knowledgeable doesn't really matter. It comes down to the love of Tolkien's works. Colbert has a deep love for the Legendarium. Yep, of course. I was just kind of joking about it, and I says I am more knowledgeable. It doesn't really matter. Of course it doesn't. I'm never someone who'd, if you said you're into a band and then someone says name 10 songs or you're not a true fan and all that, I'm definitely not that person. If someone's watching one of my videos and they ask, what is Gandalf? And you think, well, you should know that if you're watching it. It's like, of course I'm not going to be like that. I'm going to love actually telling them what Gandalf is and recommend what they could read to actually find that out and all that kind of stuff. It's I think the point was that naming all the Valar or something like that isn't as impressive to me as being able to hold a conversation about Tolkien. And it's just a shame that there's a lot of people who are really knowledgeable about it, but they never share anything that they think about it. It's very strange to me. I think that's why I think people mentioned like Girl Next Gondor channel earlier. It's a shame why I think channels that do that kind of thing aren't as popular. They put a lot of effort into putting their own analysis into words and their own thoughts down and sharing them, and people don't really care about it as much as here's the history of Manwe or something like that. It's anyone can write that stuff, surely. If you're into Tolkien, we've all read it, haven't we? It's I don't understand that. I keep seeing that word Sauronite getting used everywhere. What is that? Sauronite. Sounds silly. I've almost caught up. The comments are stopping. Is everyone leaving? Yeah, the viewers are going down. I must be boring everyone. Everyone will love this. Another Rings of Power question. Elena again asks, what are my views on how Sauron was portrayed in Rings of Power? Did you like that they tried to make him less one-dimensional, like how many usually view him? such a good point. I like anything where they're showing that Sauron isn't just an evil Dark Lord. I want to rule the world, ha ha ha, that kind of thing. Sauron does have depth to him, and yeah, they went the route of nothing's evil in the beginning. Unfortunately, they've messed up the timelines, so messed up with the condensing it that Sauron by this time wasn't wasn't very good. You know, it's all this, and I don't think they showed it very well. The good intentions kind of thing. I could definitely see what they were going for. I don't think they succeeded though, but I appreciate they kind of tried it. They're not making them one dimensional, but it went more into this realm of the mystery of who Sauron is. Even though I guessed it as soon as that guy showed up in the raft, I went, "That's Sauron," and but I'll say that I knew that as someone who's read Tolkien to death. I remember asking my brother, who's never read Tolkien, and I says, "Did you guess that he was Sauron?" And he said, "I had no idea." You know, so we have to kind of get out this idea of everyone knows Tolkien as well as us. Your average viewer who's never read or anything would maybe not even think that one of these figures was Sauron or something. I don't know, but yeah, it's. I don't like the actor they had. I didn't really like what he was doing in the story. I just don't like how they handled it. But like I say, I appreciate that they were going for Sauron being more than just a Dark Lord, but it just wasn't. This wasn't very good. It's that bit where he walks out with Celebrimbor, and I was like, oh, they can do the rings now, and it's also rushed, and um, the ever patient Sauron just suddenly doesn't seem very patient. It's all happening in a few episodes, and uh, I think it should have been obvious to people as well when he was in Numenor. Um, and they're not writing him one dimensional, but do they still get Sauron? I don't know. Um, this is why if you're watching season two, it'll be interesting. Well, I'll say it'll be interesting. I'm not really that bothered, but see what they do with Sauron. But I heard they're bringing that actor back, and I thought that was so goofy as well. See when his plans failed, basically, right? He's trying to corrupt Galadriel or whatever, and then you see that weird scene where he walks back to Mordor, which has magically been made, and he still looks like that guy. I can't really forget the guy's name. What's the character's name? The made up fake Sauron character. I keep thinking Haldir. It's obviously not that. I can't remember. I'm looking at the chat to see if someone writes it down. What was his name? Halbrand. Yeah, Halbrand, right? And he's like, he shows back up in Mordor, like looking like him. Like, why are they like thinking the audience is so stupid that if you know he's Sauron now and then he shows back up in Mordor and he doesn't look like Sauron, they're like, well, who's that? Show him shape shifting or whatever, then, right? Just that's so weird that you just saw him go back there with his like evil grin and all that. And I'm like, oh, it's what I didn't want to see. And plus, I know he was doing the three rings, which he didn't actually get involved in the tail. Does it mean that in the second season they're going to have him look like that, but then they're going to have him go back to Eregion as Annatar, and he'll look like an elf or something? Um, Again, I'm not really bothered, right? I'm making out that I'm interested to see, but I'm guessing they're going to do something like that. Or are you actually going to see Dark Lord Sauron, which again is disappointing because they just make him look like he did at the beginning of the Fellowship of the Ring films, which I think is more of a Morgoth look. They're all scared to have their own designs for these figures, but anyway, I've spent ages talking about this. It's cool that they portrayed him as more than one dimensional, but unfortunately, I don't think they did a very good job. I could have just said that. This always gets people writing in the chat when you talk about Rings of Power. I remember having people telling me I'd betrayed Tolkien because I think I did a live stream about Rings of Power, one live stream out of 100 videos or something, and I was pissing on Tolkien's grave, apparently. Even though I say I don't like it. Am I the bleed from within guitar player? No, I've not heard of them, but bleed from within, right? I've never heard of them. If I Google them, they're going to be metalcore or something, aren't they? They sound like that with that name. Let's see if I'm right. Oh, it doesn't say that. Metalcore. I was right, of course. You can just tell with the names, can't you? But they're from Scotland. Hold on, do I look like the guitarist? I do not. I don't look anything like him. Right. Almost getting to the end here. I'll be wrapping up soon, so get any points in. I'll need to go to my bed. Gandalf asks, how do I imagine Sauron's presence in Barad-dur? He has a physical form, but we don't really know anything beyond that. He's beyond mortals, so perhaps time passes differently for him. How do I imagine him? I imagine him like if I can find it. I imagine him like this. So, yep, a physical form. Kind of think I like to imagine him more as well, with Tolkien's words about these figures returning to physical forms that they had before, I see him as more of a kind of corrupted, diminished version of the end of his second age form with like a missing finger and all that. And you're right, this whole time passing differently probably does, as in he I don't mean like time actually passes differently, but it'll feel kind of different to him. But I imagine Sauron almost exclusively just sitting in some high part of his tower with the Palantir, endlessly looking into it because he doesn't need to go and sleep or eat or anything like that. That's the whole point. That's what makes him terrifying. I think it's 24/7 searching for the ring, looking into a Palantir, maybe communicating with the Nazgul or the Mouth of Sauron or whatever, but endlessly searching for it and never looking away from it. It's a bit like we see that with Pippin when he picks up the Palantir, looks into it, and he's basically initiating some sort of communication. Well, kind of. I think it's Sauron doing the work, but the fact that he's looked into it, Sauron's immediately aware that someone's looking into it and grabs hold of him mentally, because Sauron's looking into it as well. Because where else would he be looking? He's not a big eye on top of the tower. He's sitting in there, searching for this ring. And as I said, the terrifying part is he does not need to do anything else. He's just imagine that, like, just all day, every day, just staring into the Palantir or communicating with these top servants, whatever. That's what I imagine. And I think that's quite a cool image. Radvald, it's just as like the Mouth of Sauron is just a random Numenorian. People, for some reason, want him to be a previously named character, but why? I think I've mentioned this in a few streams before. I like to imagine I've invented the trope. That's very arrogant of me, but I'm sure someone has before, and there's a name for it on tvtropes.org or whatever it is. But I think Star Wars is guilty of this a lot. I personally call it the small universe trope, where in Star Wars, which I've not watched in years and years, but Star Wars always seemed like the universe or the galaxy's enormous. It's a galaxy, but you'll bump into someone you know on another planet. There's people I know and that I work with in this city I live in, and there's literally hundreds or thousands of opportunities for me to bump into them in this city somewhere, and I never do. I bump into them like at work. We're in the same building, but it's like, this is just a city, and it's like people go to the same places and all that, and it's like you never see them. But in Star Wars, you can go to another planet and you'll bump into someone, right? And then all the characters, mysterious characters, are revealed as being related to some other character, and that's why I call it small universe. It's like everyone's related, or everyone's tied together, despite the world being so massive, right? And that's what it's like with the Legendarium. A lot of people do this. The Mouth of Sauron can't apparently just be a random Numenorian who's now the Mouth of Sauron. He has to have been a ring bearer or a lord from Numenor, or it has to be someone. It's the same with the Witch King. He couldn't have just been a really powerful man who descended from Numenor, who grew into power and became the Witch King. He has to be a king of Numenor, and let's find out which one he is. And it's putting everything into a neat box with the ribbon on it. It's like every character, we know where they came from, how they all tie into each other. I remember even though I like the games, the Shadow of War and Shadow of Mordor, they do that. They end up giving identities to the Ringwraiths, and it's all figures that I'm sure they make a. Did they make a Sealder one? I'm trying to remember, which is kind of crazy. And they made a Helm Hammerhand one, and it's like all these figures, they're all the Ringwraiths, and it's like they can't just be somebody random that became the Ringwraith, and that's the figure. It's yeah. So you're saying that people, for some reason, want him to be a previously named character because people are obsessed with that. They have to know the answers to everything, and there can't be any mysteries. And that's why you get people trying to look in the text and prove to you that this figure is actually this figure. And I would say, well, if Tolkien meant that, I'm sure he would have. I'm sure he would have written it. Good Crusader with an actual Crusader picture. What's up with the Ringwraith city? Minas Morgul. Why is it all spooky? Because it's been tainted and corrupted by very spooky figures. So it's Again, if you're thinking about the films, they've taken the description in the books, which does say that kind of eerie glow, and uh, it has to take it literally and put it on show for you. But I think Tolkien's basically saying this previous glorious city is corrupted. It's got an evil presence about it. It's you don't want to walk near it. It's evil basically, and it now looks evil. This light, which may have been something great to behold at one time, now seems evil and sickly, and um, that's why it seems spooky. The Ringwraiths took it over. It houses orcs and other horrors, and um, it's showing that it's not just figures that can be corrupted. Places can be corrupted, and land can be corrupted. We see it with like Mirkwood as well. That used to be a great Greenwood the Great, and it becomes corrupted, and it's you can feel it in the earth itself. So it's kind of like that. The city has been captured, and being in its presence would fill you with dread because of those dreadful figures that are in there. So that's why it's like that. Enoch, again, I have been seeing all your comments, but I think you said earlier like some weren't showing up or something. But um, I've sometimes in previous streams I just pick out questions and I keep on picking the same person, and other people don't get their questions. So you have asked some stuff that I've not had a problem with what you've asked, but I've had to answer other people. So, but you've asked, who do you think is more childish, spiteful, the worst wicked behavior across their lives, Melkor or Satan? I would say Satan is worse. Even knowing he'll lose, he'll still go and tuckle down. I think we can't really say one or the other because one is directly um, one exists in this world, this writing, because of the other one. There's plenty. I'm not saying one's analogous to the other, or uh, one is meant to be the other one. You know, I'm just saying that Melkor is described as the satanic figure of the Legendarium. Tolkien says that more than once, and personality-wise, very similar. This whole rebellion against God and seeking the power on high, and trying to place yourself, like I say, above the creator, and corrupting the children. Was the fall of man tale, the tale of Adnel and the Legendarium is, you can easily read that and think of original sin and Adam and Eve and all of that. Of course you can, right? So he's meant to be the satanic figure. So it's more childish, spiteful, wicked. Both. Of course, it would have to be both. Obviously, there might be a lot of religious people here who would go with Satan because, arguably, even though we say Melkor is the original evil in the Legendarium, Melkor himself wouldn't exist in writing without Satan. So maybe Satan is the answer. And I know I just said I didn't want to answer questions from the same people all the time and that, but there's an interesting one here again from Enoch who says similar bad mindsets are being applied to the nameless things beneath Moria, creating errors and exalting the nameless things to dumb Lovecraft levels of power and evil. It's illiterate. you'd really like my video on the Nameless Things, where I talk about the Nameless Things and Lovecraftian horror. But I'm agreeing with you here. It's people seem to think the Nameless Things are like a race. The Nameless Things, what are they? What could they be? But um, depending on how you view names, Ungoliant is almost like a nameless thing, and that's why I'm meaning that they're not like a race. It's a term that's applied to things that you don't know. You don't know what they are. You don't know. They've not been, I'll say, categorized. You know what I mean? It's they exist outside of knowledge, that kind of way. And Ungoliant, her name's basically just saying she's a spider, big evil spider, a gloom weaver, and all that kind of thing. It's Ungoliant isn't a name that she would have given herself. We don't know what her name would be if she even had a name. So that's why I'm kind of using it that way, saying nameless things. It's Sauron isn't a nameless thing. We know that that's a name he was given, but he had a name before. We know that he's a Maiar. He served Aule and he then served Melkor. It's well established what he is. But these, whatever it is that's dwelling beneath the earth, it could be a group of individual spirits. They could all be similar in nature. We don't know. They're nameless things. And I think that's why I'm not saying exalting them to Lovecraftian levels of power and evil. I think one thing I love about Lovecraft is that the beings aren't really evil. They're above being evil. But I'm saying Lovecraftian in terms of unknowable. That's how I describe them. It's beyond your knowledge, and that's what makes them really terrifying. And they're nameless things. But of course, a lot of people, I don't think they watch that video. I think they click on it and they see the title saying, "What are the nameless things?" And they get really kind of rude and cheeky about it, saying, "What's in the name? Like they're nameless." And I goes, "Well, watch the video and actually listen to what I'm talking about." But yeah, it's if people are equating them to like Lovecraftian gods and stuff, fair enough. But that's not how I was doing it. Istari, what's the distinction between a Valar and a Maiar, besides Tolkien writing that these particular 15 Ainur were Valar? Again, this is something that's kind of hard to for religious people that are here. What distinguishes the greatest of the angels from lesser angels? If we would view them all as angels, it's one of those kind of things. There's something that's known for the Ainur that these particular spirits are the greatest. They instinctively know it. There's no arguing about, well, this figure should be one of the Valar. No, the Valar are the Valar. They are for all the spirits that descended into the earth, they are distinguished as being the greatest. And even within that group, there's the Annatar who are even greater, which I said in the video about the Annatar, I think is to do with the relationship with shaping the earth and the elements of the earth and that kind of thing. But that the distinction is that they have created that distinction. They're all powerful. The Ainur are all powerful. They're all concerned with matters of the earth and shaping it and governing it. But the Valar are particularly great in terms of the gifts from Eru and what they have actually put into the earth. Their role in shaping it, they stand above the others in authority and use that word power. There's no argument, and it's maybe something that's quite hard for us to distinguish. Would we see Ossie and know that he wasn't as great as Ulmo. I don't know. Would probably be in awe of both of them, but Ossie would know that Ulmo was greater than he was. I think that's what Tolkien's going for. It's more for them to distinguish them rather than men to know the difference between the two of them. Ben, was asking about Sauronite, the validity of Sauronite and the existence of Sauron cults in the Legendarium, as opposed to Tolkien wikis. Well, yeah, Sauron would have been worshipped, but obviously we know more about Melkor worship. But figures in the east and the south would view Sauron as kind of God King. But I've never really read that word been used. Again, there's no need to kind of name Sauron worshippers except calling them Sauron worshippers. It's plus Sauronite sounds like a stupid name to call it. So yeah, it's probably just added to one of the wiki pages. They like to make some stuff up. And they'll need to wrap up soon. It's getting pretty late, but there's a few more I'll answer. Ryan, do I think that the Valar were involved in the War of Wrath? I assume Eonwe would be strong enough to defeat the weakened Morgoth. Well, I don't think it was really about Eonwe being able to defeat Morgoth personally. But the problem with the War of Wrath is that we're reading it in the Silmarillion from text that Christopher Tolkien's picked out that's the most complete. There's a lot of kind of last battle kind of ideas there, especially with Ancalagon, and it kind of messes with it a bit. It's why it's such a kind of rushed chapter. But I think it makes no sense. Well, Eonwe leading it is a result of Eonwe once being a child of the Valar back when they had children in early Legendarium. And in the text, he was called Fionwe, but he's called Eonwe, and he is leading the host of the Valar, okay? And I just think it makes no sense that if the Valar were present, that Eonwe would be leading the host. That doesn't make much sense to me. The Valar would lead that. No matter how great any of the Maiar are, they're not the Valar. They're the authority, and they still had the government of the world, and even the least of the Valar being present would be in charge, surely. And I think that's good enough reason. And then people say, "Oh, but what about when Melkor was defeated and the Valar dragged him back and that thing?" But Onwe was still there, with the chain and all of that. If you think that the Valar are present then, that's the war been over, even if you think that. And that's different. Doesn't mean they participated. Plus, it's not really in the style of the Valar by that time. It's if the Valar were over there personally dealing with it, I don't think you'd have needed the host, to be honest. But their relationship with the world was changing by that time. So I don't think they were present. Even if you think they were present at the end of it, it's at the end of it. I don't think they participated in the war. But I think the Maiar did. At least one of them. I think probably more of them. It'd be weird if it was just one as well. But I don't think the Valar did. Man, some good questions that I'm not going to have time to answer. Like Oliver's asked a really good one about Sauron's motivations, but I'd be here for 20 minutes talking about it again. I'm going to have to go soon, so I apologise for that. Another good one here. I'll answer this one. Good Crusader, again. Why was Sam able to give Frodo back the ring? Why did the orcs think he was an elf lord while he had the ring? Sam wasn't... I don't want to say he wasn't corruptible. Everyone's corruptible, but he had no desire for power. You have that moment in the... You have that moment in the Lord of the Rings where it tempts him with the garden, Mordor, the plateau of Gorgoroth becoming a garden and all that. And it's almost laughable that it actually tempts with that, because he ends up realizing that it's so ridiculous. Like, I don't want that. And it can't get him that way. And Sam really does take on the burden as, I had to take the ring because I thought Frodo was dead, and we can't just abandon the quest. I have to continue. That's my job. That's what we signed up for. And when Frodo wants the ring back, Sam has the will to give it back. He doesn't want to keep it. There's no... I don't know if the movies put this idea forward or something, but the ring can be handed over. It's not like as soon as you hold it, you're never going to let it go and you need to have your hand cut off to get it. Sam can give it back because there's powers at work that are almost greater than the ring. This power of like love and friendship and all that. I know I sound like the Care Bears, but it's... Sam can overcome that to give the ring back to Frodo, because it's Frodo. Frodo is the one that took on the burden and he wants it back. So Sam's like, yeah, you can give it back. And the orcs thought he was an elf lord because that's the power of the ring. It's a bit like, you know, when Frodo was casting down Gollum, I say he's using the ring at that time. Sam's seeing a perception of Frodo that Frodo is putting out into the world. Now the white, the white robed figure, and it's seeming so lofty and greater than what he should be. It's this figure of power and strength and purity and all that he's putting out, and Sam can see it. That's the power of the ring. And the same kind of thing's happening with Sam here. It's like the orcs are being overwhelmed by the ring, and that's what the ring does. There's really cool moments, I think, that show what the ring can do with certain figures. And yeah, hopefully I've answered that. Okay, I need to wrap up. There's too many good questions. Why are all the questions coming now? I'll never make it to the end. I'm having to skip all these good ones. The Mouth of Sauron was Fatty Bulger in disguise. He's actually Barlam and Butterbur. Whoa, I can't believe I'm having to skip these because I need to go to my bed. I wish people would save these questions. There's so many good ones. Sauron's fair form in Numenor. Ungoliant and Tom Bombadil talk. I'm going to have to just pick one more and then go, getting late here. What one will I pick? So I do apologise if I've not answered your questions, because I will just be here the whole night answering them. Sauron is the friends we make along the way. I keep wanting to pick a last question, but they're so in depth, I don't want to rush through them. Thank you, Ben. Much appreciated. I'm stuck here, folks. I can't answer that one last. Who would win, one Ent or the whole Shire? Who would win, one Ent or the whole Shire? It'd be the Shire. Is that actually going to be the one that answer last? That really stupid question. Oh, thank you, Starry. Another super chat. You're very welcome, and thank you. Oh, another one. Maybe I should just say everyone's giving super chats now. Celebrate the first super chat from Oliver. I thought I could click something and it would say. Thank you all for that. Another one. You're all far too kind. I'll need to do live streams more often. Have myself an iron brew. Oh yeah, this is a new artist working on the channel, Christopher. What does Hador look like? That's for you to work out, unfortunately. You've probably noticed that if you've been looking for Hador artwork, there's about two pieces, like, in the whole internet. No one seems to draw Hador, so you'll have to look at the text and use your artistic abilities to draw the greatest Hador ever, because you do know that if you actually make a good one, that's the one people will use, because the other ones aren't too great, to be honest. And this is a good one I can answer, very easy one. As for the Ents versus the Shire, I say the Shire because even if I can't believe I'm answering it, but even if the Ent is like tearing the place to pieces, eventually they should know that they could set them on fire, wouldn't they? It's the Shire's a big place, and could one Ent destroy the whole thing? I think eventually they would maybe burn them to death. Give Amazon ideas, they can maybe go and make that. And when's my next live stream? I don't know. I don't really plan these ones. People were saying I should do one a month, but I always think that, I'm saying that after all the questions tonight, I always think that eventually I'll do it and there'll be nothing left to ask, but there's always questions. So one a month would be good. I don't know if people think that's too often, or one every couple of months or something, but I couldn't do it like once a week or something like that. I think people get fed up seeing me, so I'll try and do more. I've not done not very many of them. But if people like them, that's cool. I'll do more of them. But for that, people just need to tell me if they do enjoy them. I don't want to assume. And if they want it to be themed or just general like this, you know. I have done themed ones before where people ask good questions and then I'm like, I can't answer that because this stream's about Lord of the Rings and you're asking about Beren or something, and I feel quite bad about that. So I'll try and do more streams. I'll book one in for May, maybe around the 2-year mark. That's the anniversary, so I might do one around that time. And yeah, people seem to want more of them. Yeah, I'm always nervous about doing them, and I always think it's going to be terrible, and no one will ask anything, and I won't know what to say or whatever. But then I get into them, so yeah, I think I'll try and do one a month then, because I've also got the members only ones that are a bit, or even more kind of casual, and they're usually once a month. I'm taking a break from them just now, like the podcast, but that'll come back in June. So maybe a public one in May, and then if that goes well again, maybe just start booking it in once a month for us to talk non-stop about Tolkien. And then the inevitable will happen. The TV show will come out for another season. YouTube will go mental with Rings of Power talk. I'll curl up in a ball and ignore it for 8 weeks or whatever, and then I'll come back. But we're nearly at 11 here, so I'll wrap up here and say thanks for everyone who's been out. This has been on for, I think, about 3 hours this time. I've not moved in 3 hours, and it's been good. So I want to show my appreciation to everyone who's showed up, asked questions, super chats, all that good stuff. I'm hoping if you've liked this and you're not subscribing yet, that I hope you do that. I'm trying to reach, I sound like I'm desperate for subs here. I'm trying to reach 30,000 so that I've reached 30,000. That's the only reason. And it'd be cool if people would help me get to that. And then I can start harassing people to get to 50,000. So what's coming up? I'll finish with that. I'm doing a video on Rohan, of all places. I'm talking about its real history and its fake history. I don't want to spoil it for people who don't know what I mean by that. I think it's quite an interesting topic. I'm still planning on the David Day video. It's not working out yet. I've filmed it about 10 times and I really don't like it and I keep deleting it. I maybe need to change the format I'm doing or something like that, but I'm still planning on that. And I also have, what's the other video? If we reach 30,000, hint, hint, I'll do a Tom Bombadil video or 2. And that's the plan for the moment. As I said about 5 minutes ago, podcast, there won't be one in April and there won't be one in May. Taking a break from that for the moment. And season 2 will be in June. I'll start with that. And that means that if I'm doing it once a month, each season will have 10 episodes. And that's nice. I like that. So I'll bring that back. Maybe there'll be changes to it. I don't know yet. But that's June. So that's if you're looking forward to episode 11 in this month or whatever, it's not going to be there. But it will be back. I've not abandoned it. And that's what's coming up. So I better get to writing all this stuff out if I'm promising it. And someone's asked, I need to answer it. Would I consider reading the Lord of the Rings books chapter by chapter? Not to put on YouTube, because my channel would get shut down very, very quickly if I did that. Reading it is some Patreon benefit or something, maybe, if people wanted that. I don't know if the people on Patreon would, but reading the Lord of the Rings, maybe, who knows. But I can't do it on YouTube because I wouldn't have a channel after the 3rd chapter or something. HarperCollins and the estate are rightfully, but very, very protective of their IP, and you don't get away with doing that stuff. So maybe do it in the future, but it wouldn't be on YouTube. It would have to be like a member benefit or something like that, or a members only video that was hidden from public. But never say never. And again, thanks everyone, and talk to you in the comments sections of other videos. But based on what people have said, I think there'll be another live stream in May, so hopefully you can turn out for that one. But really appreciate you all coming out, and